Good afternoon, and welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Before we get started, a few quick reminders. Anyone who is registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by early next week. And if you have any questions, be sure to enter them into the Q&A bar at the lower right-hand side of your interface. Today, we welcome Mike Bornhurst, President and part owner of Citrin. If you don't already know, Citrin provides valet, porter, and employee management services to auto dealers across the country, which is basically a necessity anymore in this economy. Mike, with that, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Rachel. Hey, everybody. I wanted to talk to you today, and I thought it was the timing was good about, what are some of the positions that may appear like overhead, may look like unapplied labor or support costs that could have a big impact on your revenue. I know everyone's looking at ways to watch expenses, so I wanted to share that with you. And some of the mistakes leaders tend to make when pressured to cut costs, I wanted to talk about those. I've seen it in my career and certainly seen it in the business we're in today. And some of these costs actually may cause you to reduce revenue over time with a small improvement in expenses. And I know that's not everybody's goal. Unapplied labor and support roles in service departments tend to be undervalued and underappreciated when costs are being evaluated. It's always that role, that service porter, the car wash person, the shuttle driver that someone says, hey, maybe we can reduce those costs. They're not revenue driving roles. And sometimes the implications of those changes are not evaluated or contemplated first. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. The other thing I'd tell you in my long career is cost reductions by reducing headcount is never a great catalyst for productivity improvement. Just having less people and say, wow, productivity is going to go up is usually not a good way to make that happen. And then you guys have all focused so much in the last years on setting the customer service expectations, raising the bar, and you've set those. So changing the support changes the future experience for the customer. And if it diminishes customer service, it's definitely going to hurt you in your surveys and just overall customer retention. There's definitely a better way to think through cutting costs and cutting those support roles, and I'll talk about that at the end. So who am I? Mike Bornhurst. I'm relatively new to the industry, joined as one of the owners of Citrin in 2018. But I have had a 30-plus year career as a C-suite executive. I started at the ground levels. My first job was in 1990 with ADT Security Services, literally selling alarm systems to consumers. I rose up in ADT. I jumped into some private equity-owned businesses in the C-suite, was CEO for a couple $100 million business. And really stumbled upon the founder of Citrin and just fell in love with the business and what we were doing for the young people in the business, and joined all in May of 2018. Citrin's actually started in 2006. It was a high-end valet parking service that was contacted by an auto dealer in 2011. We started, and really since then have focused strictly supporting auto dealers in the U.S. And begun to scale nationally when I joined. That's kind of why I came into the business. Is you had an entrepreneur who started the business in college and said, "Hey, I want to bring somebody in who's going to help me scale the business." And we partner with dealers to manage critical support functions for service departments, greeting customers, vehicle intake, vehicle movement, pickup and delivery, lot organization, car wash. So really, any of the unskilled labor inside the dealership we support. We're up to 800 plus team members serving 80 rooftops in 12 cities. And one of the reasons we can do such a nice job is we have a very good Glassdoor and Indeed rating, which gets us more applications and which draws more people to the company. So that's a little bit about us. Let's jump into the content. When pressured to reduce costs, and we're seeing it with some of our clients at the beginning of this year, most dealers look for reductions in the service department. And when they're looking at the service department, they say, hey, what are the non-revenue generating positions? service drive greeters, porters, valets, shuttle drivers, car wash attendants. The question to ask before making those changes, I would say, is who pays the price or covers the work for those reductions? And in most cases, it's advisors, technicians, service managers, and customers. The simple result is those higher paid roles are actually covering the work of the lower paid roles with the changes. So, usually not a great result from what we've seen. And we've certainly taken over services in locations where we said, wow, this really hurt the business. So cutting manpower without a plan, as I said earlier, rarely drives productivity. Saying, hey, we're just going to run with less people and people are going to have to work harder without thinking through the implications and working through the places where there's opportunities to cut typically creates problems. I've seen it in this industry and in the other industries I was in. So let's talk about some of the impacts and then we'll jump into how can this be done differently. Often advisors pay backup for unmotivated short staff porter team. So what's the impact if you cut that team? It takes the focus away from customer communication. The advisor's ability to take more customers and driving revenue is diminished, and overall morale and job satisfaction. We've had advisors that have left locations because prior to us getting there, they were short staffing the porters and they spent all their time moving cars. A possible result, obviously, is lower revenue, higher turnover with advisors, and we know how hard it is to hire and get people trained, and then certainly poor customer service. So that's the impact on the advisors, and I'm sure many of you know all this. Technicians, I mean, shop flow is impacted by the service drive. If we're not moving the service drive and getting the cars parked and ready for the technicians, it's going to impact them. Also, advisors not available, which can slow approvals for additional work. So that hurts the techs as well. You guys have seen it. If the parking lot's not well organized, the techs are spending time finding cars. And then I've seen locations where the techs are running cars through the car wash. And it's taken up an extra 5 or 10 minutes of their productivity. And we know how valuable that time is from a technician standpoint. So you guys know the results: lower productivity, lower pay, lower morale, potentially higher turnover on the technician side. And then service managers. I mean, I've seen some of the highest paid porters on the planet in locations that we've talked to before taking over service. And that's seen service managers spend much of their day parking or delivering cars, taking away from their main responsibilities of leading the team, driving revenue and creating a great customer experience. It creates more stress for an overly demanding position. I mean, service managers have so many support functions, and as we continue to do more with mobility, they're continuing to have more put on their plate. And then just adding the stress of, hey, in the morning and the evening, I'm going to have to pull up cars because I don't have a great support staff, or I cut that support staff, certainly can create some significant issues. It's that those managers who have become distracted from the true role, poor morale, and they're just spending less time on what's important, and that's people, customers, and revenue. So certainly it can impact those teams. And then customers' impact of reduced support staff, and I can't say this enough, your customers already have an expectation of the service levels you provide. The minute you change that level of service, you diminish the service in their eyes. The biggest one that I've seen that's a good example is locations that offered courtesy car wash and then stopped offering it. Created a big customer service problem for them because the customer had that expectation. Hey, I can drive by and get my car washed for free. Now that they stopped, they're upset. But that's a simple example. But they have an overall expectation of, hey, I'm going to get greeted when I get here. Someone's going to help me right away. And when that changes, it's certainly going to hurt you from a service perspective. You know, what could happen? Poor or no greeting when arriving, slow process getting the car into the shop. Waiters can be significantly impacted, slower pickup process, and limited advisor communication. I mean, we all know when a customer brings their car in, everything takes an hour. Changing the transmission takes an hour, so the clock's ticking in their mind. In their mind, we know it doesn't really. So when there's any slow up in the process, it certainly is very impactful on the customer's willingness to add additional services that are recommended, and their patience with the process, if they're a waiter or even if they're getting dropped off at work or home. So certainly that all can result in poor customer satisfaction, loss of customers, reduced revenue per RO based on a poor experience, more declined services. You guys know and see all this. But the problem that happens is when you do a blanket cut, and this is true in this industry or any others, the first few months it feels good, right? If we cut support staff, the revenue's still flowing in. You're going to see the savings in the first few months, and labor cost will be reduced, revenue will hold up, and hey, things will be good. Long term, though, month 3, month 4, month 5, as customers start to contemplate coming back, as there's more dissatisfaction with the experience, you're getting advisors who are dissatisfied, technicians, customers build over time, possible turnover, revenues impacted over time, unwinding the reductions in expense, and then unwinding them becomes not possible, right? And you may get pressure to do more because you're missing your revenue expectations. It really becomes, in a lot of businesses, if you don't take a thoughtful approach to cost reductions, a death spiral. You reduce costs, it lowers revenue. You reduce more costs, it lowers revenue, and you keep going down that path. So there really is another way to save dollars with support labor and unapplied labor, and it's kind of our model. It's how could we possibly provide a good value to our customers if we did it the same way our customers did it? So we take a different approach, and here's a couple things we do differently. And you can do this too. Create a schedule to staff heavy during peak and cut during slow times, and share resources. This is the common thing I see when I'm in dealerships talking about our services. They have a porter come in at 7, and simple example, have one come in at 7, one come in at 9, and one come in at 11 to take them through the day. So the lowest staffing levels are in the morning and in the evening because you have porters coming in and dropping off throughout the day. Perfect example on the porter side. Same way with car wash. Hey, I got everybody coming in at 8. Well, first couple hours of the day, the car wash is slow. But it's going to be really busy in the middle of the day. So an example would be is staff, like this example, bring porters in, everybody in first thing in the morning, put together a team of full and part-time people, cut back middle of the day when it's slower, and ramp back up at the end of the day. And then the last hour of the day, a lot of locations, it's really slow. Saturday may be different times too, late in the afternoon. But staff based on your needs. Don't staff based on the person that you hired, what they tell you the hours they can work. And when we put together a team for a dealership, we build out the hours and then we hire people that have the availability to work those hours. I find in most places I go into, it's the opposite. Hire people and they just figure out what hours they can work, even if it doesn't fit perfectly into the schedule. So here's a way to cut back. I would say use the high turnover that you're seeing in those positions to replace the staff who can work the hours your team needs, not the hours they want to work. Most important is support teams need a leader. Assign one and have them lead. Very rarely do porters, car wash teams, shuttle drivers, valets doing pickup and drop off have a person, and it probably shouldn't be the service manager, service director. They got too many other competing priorities. To have a person that's assigned to them, maybe somebody inside that team that's the leader, that's going to manage their day-to-day activities. Lower productivity occurs when you have frontline hourly team members that aren't led, and they need to be led minute by minute, not once a day. They literally need to be led minute by minute. A sports analogy might be you need a quarterback on that team who's involved in every play but is also in charge. No overtime. Just make sure you design the team so they're not working overtime. It'll save you lots of dollars. And then we absolutely recommend, we do it with all our teams, is cross training. If someone says when you're looking at someone to hire, all I want to do is drive shuttle, I wouldn't hire them. I would make sure the person who drives shuttle is okay with being the service porter and greeting customers. And they're also okay with jumping in the car wash and helping wash cars. Because those roles have different busy times. Car wash is a great team to share with service porters because the car wash is busiest in the middle of the day and the service porters are busy at each end of the day. So those two teams working together really help keep the number of hours where you're paying people to do these functions as low as possible. It's certainly important in this process too to have advisor buy-in. Share with your advisors what your plan is in advance if you're going to reduce expenses, if you're going to move to this model, and make sure they're on board that, hey, there's going to be some times in the middle of the day when it's a little slower, they need to pitch in. They need to grab a car, they need to move a car. Asking in first makes a big difference, as opposed to just letting it happen. Another really important piece of this, I've actually been in hundreds of dealerships in the last 5 years. I've never, ever had a service manager, service director, a GM hand me a manual and says, hey, this is what our support functions do. This is how they should be trained. This is what they do in their slow times, tasks. This is their opening procedures. It's their closing procedures, which means those teams with the turnover they have do not have good direction. You can gain efficiency, not by cutting people and just saying do more. You can gain efficiency when you have some simple operating procedures to say, here's how we tag cars, here's how we park cars, this is what we do to open the day, this is what we do to close the day, here's the car wash services that we provide, so you're meeting consistent expectations. Here's what we should be doing in the shuttle. Here's what we do at the end of the day to make sure it's full of gas for the next day. So having those operating procedures, which before we start with anyone, we do for every single location, is imperative. It helps when there's turnover. It helps with the new training process and just overall helps with productivity. You will get more with less when everyone knows what's expected. And that just makes sense. And then opening closing tasks are super important to set the stage for the next day. Prepare the organization for the next day, to make the call out that morning, to make the short staffing level that morning easier to absorb when things are ready for the next day. And I really have shared a little bit about the secret sauce of what we do, along with just being really good at hiring. It's just a different way of approaching it. If you do this, this is a way that you can certainly cut those support labor, unapplied labor in the process. So that's really all I had to talk about today. Just thought I'd open it up to any questions. I don't know if any questions have come in, but thought I'd open it up to any questions or comments.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. Again, if anyone has any questions for Mike, you can email him or shoot him a text as you see on the screen right there. Citrin offers such an amazing service to dealers, and I'm really glad that you could come on, Mike, and share your knowledge with us. So just thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Everybody have a good day.
Again, you will all be receiving a copy of this webinar by early next week. To those on the line, join us back here on Tuesday, April 4th at 2 p.m. Eastern as our favorite used car guys are back for our popular used car super session. So be on the lookout for promotions on how to register. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day, everyone.